The saloon in Bitter Creek wasn't known for decency. The floors were warped from spilled whiskey. The lamps swung uneven from the rafters. And the crowd inside most nights was made up of men with loud mouths and quiet regrets. But that night, it was worse. Because that night, three sisters stood on a makeshift stage, their wrists bound in rough rope, the crowd howling like dogs. Lena, the eldest at 20, kept her chin high, though her lip was bleeding. Callie, just 17, shook as she tried to shield their youngest sister. And Miriam, barely 12, clung to both of them with wide, terrified eyes. Behind them stood Lance Bragan, self-appointed organizer of the night's so-called auction, a gambler with a badge made of tin and a heart full of rot. "These girls were left behind by their pa's debts," he shouted to the crowd, waving a crumpled ledger. "And I aim to settle what he owed one way or another." The men cheered, coins clinked, whiskey sloshed. A boot slammed the table. The sisters were silent, not by choice, but by fear. And then the saloon doors exploded open. Wood cracked, dust flew. A tall man stepped through, broad shoulders backlit by the last light of the dying sun. His hat cast a shadow across his eyes, but there was fire behind them, cold and furious. His boots thudded across the warped floor as the room fell silent, confused. Lance barked, "Who in hell are—" The man spoke low and slow. "Name's Gabe Thatcher. I run the Twin Hollow Ranch 10 miles north, and I don't let girls get sold where I eat my breakfast." The crowd hesitated. No one moved. Then Lance laughed. "You aiming to buy them all yourself, cowboy?" Gabe didn't blink, didn't smile, just said, "I'm aiming to end this now." The next moment happened too fast for most to follow. Gabe stepped forward, grabbed the edge of the stage, and pulled it forward, tipping Lance off balance. Callie screamed. Miriam ducked. Lena didn't flinch. In a flash, Gabe untied the ropes with a knife from his belt and lifted Miriam off the platform like she weighed nothing. "You're safe now," he whispered. And with that, he turned, leading the sisters out the door, 3 steps ahead of chaos. Behind them, Bragan shouted curses. But no one followed, because there was something about the way Gabe stood, like a man who'd lost before and wouldn't lose again, that made even cowards back down. Outside, the sky had turned to dusk. The wind blew cold. Gabe helped the sisters onto his wagon, covered them with his coat, and climbed up beside them. Lena finally spoke, her voice hoarse. "Why, did you help us?" Gabe didn't look at her, just said, "Because no one helped my sister when she needed it, and I swore I'd never let that happen again." They rode north into the night, 3 sisters with nothing left, and a stranger who'd just risked everything to save them. The road to Twin Hollow Ranch was rough, winding between dark pine groves and open stretches of moonlit prairie. The only sounds were the creak of the wagon wheels and the breath of 4 people who didn't quite know what they were to each other yet. Gabe drove without speaking. The sisters sat close, wrapped in his coat in silence, until Callie broke it. "Are you going to turn us in?" Gabe looked over his shoulder at her. "To who?" She didn't answer, just stared at her feet. "They said Pa owed money," Lena murmured. "But he's dead. We buried him 6 days ago." Miriam sniffled. "They said we were property now." Gabe tightened his grip on the reins. "You're not property, you're people," he said. "And you're under my roof now. We'll figure the rest out when the sun's up." Twin Hollow wasn't much. 2 barns, a weathered cabin, and endless land stretching like a promise across the horizon. But to the sisters, it was heaven. Gabe helped them inside, lit the stove, and put on coffee even though none of them would drink it. He gave them his bed, slept on the floor. And when morning came, he had hot biscuits, bacon, and warm water ready like they'd always belonged there. Over the next few days, the sisters began to settle. Callie fed the hens. Lena helped fix the porch rail. Miriam followed Gabe everywhere like a shadow, asking questions with her eyes but never her voice. He didn't mind. She reminded him of someone. One morning, Lena found Gabe splitting firewood. She crossed her arms, cautious. "Why are you doing this?" He looked up. "Doing what?" "Taking us in, feeding us, protecting us. What do you want from us?" Gabe stood straight, wiped sweat from his brow, and met her eyes. "Nothing." She didn't believe him. Not yet, but she wanted to. In town, word spread fast. Some folks said Gabe had gone soft. Others said he was hiding fugitives, but no one came to Twin Hollow. Not yet. Bragan was quiet, too quiet. And that worried Gabe more than shouting. That night, after the girls were asleep, Gabe sat alone by the fire. He pulled a locket from his coat pocket. Inside, a picture, faded, nearly gone. His sister June, the girl no one saved. He closed it gently and whispered, "Not this time." Outside, the wind rose, and somewhere far off, a storm was brewing. The storm hit 3 days later. Rain came down in silver sheets, turning the dirt road to Twin Hollow into slick, rutted mud. Wind rattled the shutters. The horses paced nervously in the barn. Inside, the cabin glowed warm, lit by lanterns and filled with the quiet rhythm of a new kind of family. Lena sat near the hearth mending one of Gabe's shirts. Callie kneaded bread at the table. Miriam fell asleep on the rug with a book clutched in her hands. Gabe watched it all with a quiet kind of awe. He wasn't used to softness. His life had been one of grit and grief, but this was peace. Unexpected, uninvited, and somehow exactly what he hadn't known he needed. Later that night, while the storm howled outside, Lena joined him on the porch. Rain poured just inches from their boots, but under the overhang, it was still. "You gonna keep us forever?" she asked, her voice a blend of teasing and serious. Gabe didn't smile. "You want to go?" Lena looked out into the dark. "I don't know where we'd go." He nodded. "Then stay as long as you need." She was quiet for a beat. "You don't talk much about yourself." "I don't find it useful." Lena raised a brow. "Talking ain't about usefulness, it's about trust." He met her eyes, and for a moment something flickered between them. Not romance, not yet, but something sturdy, a seed in the dirt. The next morning, Miriam screamed. Gabe was out the door in seconds. At the end of the pasture stood a dead calf, throat slit clean. No tracks, no wolves. Just a message. Lena came running, covered her mouth. Callie stood frozen, pale as snow. Gabe's jaw clenched. "This was no animal," he said. He sent the girls inside, buried the calf, and returned to the cabin with his rifle over one shoulder and eyes colder than the creek in March. "They're testing me," he told Lena. She nodded. "Bregan? Or someone working for him? They're not finished." "What do we do?" Gabe's voice was like a growl. "We make sure we're the ones who finish it." That night, Gabe didn't sleep, and neither did Lena. She sat by the fire, watching the flames dance and listening to the wind rise. When Gabe finally looked at her, she spoke first. "If you hadn't come that night," he cut her off gently. "You don't owe me that thought. It didn't happen, and it never will again." She swallowed, then whispered, "I'm scared." He nodded once. "Me too." Then she stood, stepped closer, and did something unexpected. She placed her hand on his chest. "Thank you," she said, the words barely a breath. Gabe didn't answer, but the way he placed his hand over hers spoke everything she needed to hear. By the end of the week, everyone in Bitter Creek knew something had shifted. The saloon grew quiet when Gabe Thatcher's name was mentioned. No one joked about the girls anymore. Not out loud. Lance Bregan, however, wasn't one to forget a bruise to his pride. He sat in the corner of the saloon with a half-empty bottle and a full head of revenge. "He humiliated me," he growled to the man beside him. "Walked out with 3 girls like he was rescuing kittens." The man beside him didn't answer. He just cleaned his fingernails with a Bowie knife and waited. Bregan leaned in. "I want a message sent. To him, to them." The man finally looked up. "Big one?" Bregan nodded. "Big enough to make sure no other man gets the same idea." Back at Twin Hollow, the days remained peaceful. Almost too peaceful. Gabe kept a rifle by the door. Lena started sleeping with a knife tucked beneath her pillow. Callie watched the ridge every morning from the upper window. Miriam no longer asked questions. She just stayed close. There was no proof, but everyone could feel it coming. One morning, Gabe returned from town with a telegram in his coat. He unfolded it at this kitchen table. The girls watched as he read in silence. Then he looked up. "Marshal Redland from 3 Pines is riding in next week," he said. "Wants to talk about Bregan. Says others have filed claims against him." Lena leaned forward. "That's good, right?" "It means we're not the only ones," Gabe said. Callie frowned. "Or it means Bregan's getting desperate." Gabe nodded. "Both." That night, Lena found Gabe working in the barn. He was replacing the hinges on the side door, hands moving with careful tension. "Can't sleep?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "Can't stop listening." "To what?" "Trouble," he said. She stood there a while, silent, watching him work. Then, "You're not responsible for us, Gabe." "I know, but you treat us like you are." "I know that too." Lena stepped closer. "You don't have to carry it all alone." He looked at her, eyes tired. "I don't know any other way." She reached out, slow, uncertain, and touched his arm. "Well," she whispered, "maybe you're not meant to anymore." In that moment, something shifted. Not lightning, not heat, but something deep. The kind of understanding that comes not from words, but from standing shoulder to shoulder with someone who has fought their way back from silence. As Lena turned to go, Gabe called out softly, "You scare me, you know." She stopped. "Me?" He nodded. "Not you. What you make me want." She didn't smile, but her voice was steady. "Then we're even." Outside, the wind picked up, and far off in the distance a horse's hoofbeat echoed once, then vanished. Trouble was near, but this time, so was something worth fighting for. The wind was sharp the next morning, not with cold, but with warning. Gabe knew the signs. Cattle uneasy, birds gone silent, a hawk circling low over the barn like it sensed something just beyond the trees. He saddled his horse before sunrise. Told the girls he was going to check the southern fence line, but Lena saw through it. You're not riding out to fix a fence, she said. Gabe paused in the doorway, turned. No, he admitted. I'm going to see if Bragan's hiding behind the next ridge. Alone? He hesitated. I work better that way. Lena stepped forward, arms crossed. No, you hide better that way. He didn't argue. Didn't have to, because she was right. Gabe returned by sundown, his jaw tighter than usual. He didn't speak through dinner. Miriam tried to ask what he saw, but one look from Callie and she went quiet again. Finally, Gabe stood, poured water from the kettle, and said flatly, There are boot prints on the south side. 5 horses. Could be a scouting party. Callie gasped. Lena set her fork down carefully. They're coming? Lena asked. Not yet, but soon. They're waiting for us to drop our guard. Lena met his eyes. Then we won't. That night, the cabin didn't sleep. Gabe reinforced the barn doors. Callie helped load rifles. Even Miriam, small but determined, stacked rocks in buckets near the windows, just in case. Lena stayed at the kitchen table making a list on torn parchment. Food, water, lantern oil, escape routes. She wasn't a fighter, but she was a planner, and she wouldn't lose the life they had built. Not now. Around midnight, Gabe walked in and found her still writing. You should rest. Lena looked up. So should you. He leaned against the doorframe. I meant what I said the other night. She didn't ask what part. She just looked at him and whispered, I know. Then, slowly, she stood and crossed the room. There was no heat between them. No rush. Just gravity. A pull she hadn't realized she'd been leaning into for weeks. He took her hand. Rough palm, steady fingers. She didn't pull away. I've been afraid a long time, Lena said. Even before Bitter Creek. I think maybe I was born afraid. Gabe's voice was low. Then I hope you remember what it feels like to stop. They stood in silence. Not quite lovers, but something closer than strangers. A bond not built in fire, but in refusal to break. Outside, the night stretched wide, and just beyond the ridge, in the cover of darkness, men waited. But so did something else. A family. A rancher with nothing left to lose, and a woman who had already survived being sold and would never be taken again. The first shot came just before dawn. A crack through the trees, then silence. Gabe was already on his feet by the time the second shot rang out. Not at the house, but over it. A warning. He threw open the door, rifle ready. Lena stood behind him. Callie pulled Miriam back from the window. Gabe scanned the tree line, breath slow. 5 riders, silhouettes, still. Bragan wasn't among them. But Gabe recognized one face. Clay Rourke, a hired gun from Abilene who'd once been run out of town for disciplining a stable boy with a whip. This wasn't a bluff. It was the beginning. He turned to the girls, voice low. They're here to scare us, not break in. Not yet. Callie's eyes were wide. What do we do? Gabe checked the window, then shut the front shutters. We make them understand something real simple. This isn't the kind of place that gets taken. The standoff lasted 2 full days. The riders camped just beyond the ridge, their fires glowing orange at night. No one slept much, but no one panicked, because fear had already tried to break them once and failed. On the 3rd morning, Marshal Redlin rode in, alone but with a badge pinned square and a horse that didn't flinch. He dismounted with the calm of a man who'd broken worse than Bragan in his time. Gabe met him at the gate. Redlin, he said. Thatcher. Redlin glanced at the cabin. I hear you've got 3 girls in there who've been through hell. They have. And Bragan's boys? Gabe nodded toward the ridge. Watching, waiting. Redlin spat into the dirt. Let's make 'em wait a little longer. That evening, Lena sat beside Gabe on the porch steps, watching the trees sway under the setting sun. They won't give up, will they? She asked. No, Gabe said. But neither will we. She looked at him, searching. What are we to you, Gabe? He turned to her. Everything they weren't. Then he reached for her hand. And this time, she let herself hold on. Not just because she was tired of being alone, but because she wanted to stay. As the stars came out and the wind cooled the earth, 5 men sat in the dark beyond the ridge, still waiting for the right time to strike. But what they didn't understand was this. They weren't just facing a rancher and 3 girls. They were facing a family forged by survival, a man with guilt in his heart and fire in his eyes, and a woman who had learned that strength isn't loud, it's unbreakable. Marshal Redlin stayed through the night. He didn't talk much, just cleaned his revolver by the fire, keeping one ear tuned to the trees, the other to the breath of people trying to rest through fear. The girls had begun to sleep in shifts now. Callie curled up on the sofa with Miriam's head on her shoulder. Lena stayed by the window, lantern low, her eyes fixed on the dark. Gabe stood outside most of the night, his coat drawn tight, rifle across his chest. He wasn't just guarding the house. He was guarding the life they'd found in it. Before dawn, Redlin spoke quietly to Gabe. I sent word. If those boys out there shoot first, I've got authority to bring every badge in the county down on Bragan's operation. Gabe nodded. That might take days. Redlin shrugged. Might, but they don't know that. Mid-morning, one of the riders finally approached. Clay Rourke again. He stopped 50 feet from the house, hand raised in mock peace. "Thatcher!" he called. "No one wants blood. Just give us the girls and we ride out." Gabe stepped forward, calm. "You come any closer, and you'll find out what I want," Clay smirked. "Ain't yours to protect, cowboy. They're property by debt. Bregan's got paper." "They're human beings," Gabe said, "and I don't care what kind of ink he's hiding behind." The man's face twisted. "So you're making this your hill?" Gabe didn't blink. "I've already died on worse ones." That night, the girls sat close in the parlor, lantern flickering between them. Callie whispered, "We should run." "No," Lena said, "we've done enough running." She looked toward the door where Gabe stood silent. "He gave us back our lives. I'm not letting him stand alone." Miriam's voice was small. "Me neither." Lena rose, crossed the room, and gently placed her hand on Gabe's back. He turned, surprised. She met his eyes. "We stay. With you." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. The next day, a second telegram arrived. Gabe read it aloud. "Warrant for Bragan's arrest approved. Officers en route. ETA 48 hours. Hold position." They just had to survive 2 more days. 2 more days of waiting, watching, not knowing when the next fire would start or who would light it. That night, as the wind howled through the chimney, Lena came to Gabe by the fire. He looked up, weary. She didn't speak, just knelt beside him and took his hand. "You don't have to protect us out of guilt," she whispered. "I'm not," he said. "I'm protecting you because I want to be the man who never turns away again." She leaned in, slow, steady, and kissed him. It wasn't passion, it was trust, and he kissed her back. Not like someone claiming, but like someone honoring. Outside, unseen in the dark, Clay Rourke watched from the trees. He smiled, mean and sure. "They're getting too comfortable," he muttered. And as he mounted his horse and turned back to camp, the real plan began. It started with smoke, thin gray tendrils rising from the eastern pasture just after midnight. Callie was first to spot it from the loft window. She shouted, waking Gabe, Redlin, and the girls in seconds. Gabe didn't ask questions. He was out the door in his long coat and boots, rifle slung over his shoulder, heart pounding. The barn! By the time they reached it, the flames had begun licking the outer beams. One of the hay bales had been soaked in oil. Planted, meant to burn slow, then fast. Gabe, Redlin, and Lena threw buckets from the well while Callie rushed the animals out, one by one. Miriam held the door and didn't flinch, even when sparks brushed her sleeve. Within minutes, the flames were out. But the message had been sent. They're watching, they're willing, and they're getting closer. Back inside, Redlin pulled Gabe aside. "This is pressure. They're trying to break you before backup arrives." Gabe's voice was low and steady. "Then we don't break." "They're not looking for a gunfight," Redlin warned. "They're looking for a moment of fear. One slip, one wrong move." Gabe's eyes narrowed. "They'll be disappointed." Lena sat by the fire that night with Miriam wrapped in her arms. Her blouse still smelled faintly of smoke. She looked up at Gabe as he passed. "You saved it," she said quietly. "It's just a barn." She shook her head. "It's our life now. You keep saving it piece by piece." He didn't respond, but the way his hand brushed her shoulder as he walked by said enough. At dawn, Gabe saddled up and rode to the tree line. He left Redlin in the house, rifle ready, Callie on lookout. He found a boot print, then another, then a length of wire tied low across a trail, meant to fell a rider. He crouched low, jaw clenched. "This ends today," he muttered. Back at camp, Clay Rourke lit a cigar and smirked at Bragan's new orders. "Tonight," he said to his men, "we light up their whole world." "But the marshals," one of them started. Clay waved it off. "They'll be too late. We'll be gone by sunrise. And those girls?" He flicked ash into the dirt. "They'll go back where they belong." But what Clay didn't know was this. Lena had found her father's old rifle. Callie had learned to shoot straighter than most grown men. Miriam had carved a warning into the front door. "We are not afraid of you." That evening, as the sun bled behind the hills, Gabe stood on the porch with Redlin. "You sure about this?" the marshal asked. Gabe nodded. "They've taken too much from too many. If they come for us tonight," he chambered around, "we don't let them take another inch." And inside the house, where 3 sisters once believed they were powerless, now stood 3 women who had learned that sometimes you aren't born brave. You become it. Night fell with a silence that felt wrong. Even the wind had gone still. No owls, no creaking trees, just the steady hum of tension hanging in the air like a taut rope. Inside the cabin, Lena stood at the window with her rifle resting on the sill. Callie and Redlin covered the rear. Miriam sat in the loft, watching the hilltop with a spyglass and a whisper of breath. Gabe didn't say much. He just moved through the house like a man setting anchors, checking locks, bracing windows, loading rounds. Every motion was calm, because fear had no place here anymore. Then it came, a flicker of torchlight through the trees. a hoarse voice shouting, "Last chance, Thatcher! Hand him over or we burn you to the ground!" Gabe stepped onto the porch, rifle at his side. He didn't shout back. He didn't need to, because Redlin emerged behind him, badge gleaming in the firelight. And then Lena stepped out too, not in a dress but in trousers and boots, rifle at the ready. Callie followed, gun in hand. Even Miriam peeked through the loft window, eyes locked and steady. Clay Rourke hesitated. He expected fear. He got a wall of resistance. And before he could order a shot, another rider appeared on the ridge. Then 5, then 10 federal riders. The rest of the marshals had arrived. Panic rippled through Bragan's men. Redlin raised his voice. "Lay down your weapons and surrender now, or be prosecuted to the full extent of federal law." Clay cursed, spun his horse, but Gabe fired once. Not to kill, but to pin him. The rest dismounted, throwing down guns in a clatter of steel and dust. By sunrise, it was over. Bragan was arrested later that morning in town, drunk and unaware his men had failed him. The warrant stuck. The papers ran the story. Rancher and 3 sisters break trafficking ring in Bitter Creek. But the real truth? It didn't live in headlines. It lived in the porch swing that creaked gently in the breeze, in the way Miriam laughed again, in the way Lena looked at Gabe now, not with fear, not even gratitude, but something deeper. "I can't pay you back," she told him quietly days later. "I don't want payment," he replied. She stepped closer. "Then what do you want?" Gabe looked into her eyes. "I want you to stay." And she did, because home isn't a place. It's a person who opens the door when the world has tried to break you and never lets it try again. The cabin didn't feel like a refuge anymore. It felt like home. The threat was gone. Bragan and his men were in chains. The town of Bitter Creek, once a place of shame, now whispered about the girls from Twin Hollow with a kind of reverence. But none of that mattered to Lena, Callie, or Miriam. What mattered was that they woke each day to freedom, to peace. To Gabe, Miriam grew into the land like a flower finally given sun. She helped tend the horses, wrote letters to other girls who had escaped dark places, and kept a journal she called Things That Should Be Remembered. Callie found her voice in teaching. She opened a tiny schoolhouse down by the creek and taught letters, numbers, and the truth to children who had never been listened to. And Lena? Lena stayed at Gabe's side. Not because she needed saving anymore, but because she chose him, and he, quiet, steady, fiercely loyal, chose her right back. They didn't have a wedding in a church. They didn't need one. One morning, under the cottonwood tree that shaded the front porch, Gabe gave her a simple silver ring. "I never thought I'd have a second chance," he said. Lena took his hand, smiling softly. "You didn't. You're my first." They exchanged no vows. They didn't have to. The way he kissed her told the whole story. So did the way she leaned into it. Seasons passed. The ranch grew. So did their family, babe. Not by blood at first, but by choice. Women came seeking help. Young men came looking for honest work. No one was turned away unless they brought harm. And those who stayed? They built something that outlasted the silence of their past. Years later, when Miriam published her memoir, she wrote in the preface, "We weren't rescued. We were seen. And from that day on, we decided no one else would be forgotten again." People still whispered about that saloon auction, about the cowboy who kicked down the door, the sisters who refused to be victims, and the love that grew, quiet but fierce on the broken edge of the West. But if you ever passed through Pine Hollow and stopped by the porch of a certain weathered ranch house, you might find Lena and Gabe sitting there side by side, hands tangled, hearts steady, no words, just belonging.